So good evening all together here in Edith Marian's house and hopefully internationally in many places. Welcome from the General Anthroposophical section. We are preparing here, of course, at the Goetheanum, as in many other anthroposophical places of the world, this autumn and winter time coming, the recoming of the so-called Christmas conference, the rebirth of the Anthroposophical Society and its high school 100 years ago. So we prepare a kind of memorial, which shouldn't be a memorial, but a new impulse to work in the direction which was originally intended. And in 100 years, a lot of people tried to do. And I think it is difficult to bring a result about the fruits of the Christmas conference and the missing elements. But I think after 100 years, we can say the impulse is still there, quite strong in many places of the earth. But we need, in a way, to have a clearer consciousness, a clearer consciousness of what happened at this time and what was Steiner envisioned. And so this opening perspective for the future is a deep concern and a deep possibility. And so in the General Anthroposophical section, we try to prepare the Holy Nights in a way, the Holy Nights of this year, and hopefully the coming conceptions of the future. And preparing means a lot. I mean, this has physical sides and physical aspects, preparing conferences, preparing gatherings of people, bringing them all together. But it means also inner preparations, soul and spiritual preparations to get ready, to get prepared in a true sense of the word. And in this kind of preparations, I think we always need help and support from many aspects, but also from those who went this path before us. I mean, we belong to a movement, or maybe also to a community, at least to a society, which is more the physical outer aspect, the Anthroposophical Society. And there is always a challenge how to build it to a much more effective tool in the world that it is now, but it's now much better than it was 100 years ago. And it's a world society. It has grown in many countries, but we need support. I think we all feel it, that with our own limited forces, it's not getting as effective as it could be, and it is needed in our time. And one of the open windows to the spiritual world is the path to those living deaths, to those who did this work together with Rudolf Steiner. It was a group of people, leading spirits, I would say, of the beginning 20th century, and they have all died since decades. But I still feel they are so interested. What is the outcome of their own seeds? What is the world able to do with these founded basic elements? And tonight the perspective will be the one of Ita Wegman, a person who had a strong relationship to the so-called Christmas conference, a strong relationship to the year 23 in the biography of Rudolf Steiner and the Anthroposophical movement and society. Since Emanuel Zeilmans of Emmichhoven has published 3 volumes, or at the end 4 volumes, about Ita Wegman, her biography, and the 4th volume was about her meditations she received from Rudolf Steiner, her spiritual path. Since then, she's well known in the international anthroposophical community and society, and Emanuel's books are translated in many languages, from Hungary till the United States of America. So tonight I will go into this biography as far as I'm able to. We will follow a little bit the path of Ita Wegman in between the destruction of the Goetheanum and the Christmas conference, because this is in fact, these are the borders of the year 1923 in an anthroposophical perspective. We could easily talk about this year in German, in Swiss history, in European history as the landscape of these events, and we would confront a very, very difficult year, more shadow than light. Maybe I will touch some elements during this lecture, but the focus is on what happened here on the Dornach Hill, because the year started here with this enormous destruction. We commemorated it here on the hill, but also internationally at the beginning of the year, New Year, and more than 1,500 people gathered here that night, this awakened night. And in the Goetheanum group, we had many conversations how to commemorate a destruction. Is it sensible? Does it make sense? Or is it better to be just silent in such a night of destruction? And only one person died, and there are other fires in the world. And with the earthquake in Morocco, more than 2,000 people died some days ago. So, in fact, only a building. But it was a living building. In a way, a lot of people who contributed. And the building was designed as a school for spiritual science, as a new type of university of wisdom, of knowing, teaching, and practicing, enabling people to work in a different manner, in a different inner attitude, in education, in natural science, in medicine. So an important place on earth, because I think we all know we need new initiatives, but not only will initiatives, but initiatives with leading thoughts. What has to be done in medicine, in education, in agriculture, in ecology, in the climate crisis. And it was such a hope that Dr. Steiner and the co-workers founded such a university enabling people to humanize, to spiritualize, and to make the world more peaceful, in fact. And that this building was destroyed. So I think for those who were really in touch with the building, they knew it is not only our building or our gathering place, our society home. It was the destruction of a place, of a kind of reformation, which was meant to be a revolution. So, in a way, to start with this consideration and reflections about Ita Wegman in 23, I think it is necessary to realize that this New Year Day was really at the bottom. It was really incredibly difficult. And of course, Ita Wegman stayed the whole night on the hill. And in the first letters she sent out next year, in the beginning of January, they are full of descriptions, of course, what she experienced in that night of the fire. So there are many wonderful sentences of Ita Wegman. And just maybe one aspect, she's saying the inner attitude of Rudolf Steiner in that night of destruction gave a tremendous amount of strength to all of them who were in the night here on the hill. Steiner's force of resistance, standing there upright, and in a way also making clear there will be a second building, there will be a future, gave an enormous amount of force, of resistance to the group around. And it's interesting, in one of these early January letters, Ita Wegman says that the individual and the common will in the anthroposophical society is stronger than ever now. So not a weakened society, not a weakened community, not a weakened group, but reinforced. This sounds very strange, but on the other hand, what is the 20th century other than an epoch or a decade or many decades where people underwent an enormous loss, but a lot of resistance forces also came up. So a saeculum, or at least an epoch of light in between, in the midst of shadow. And so Ita Wegman described in some of the January letters the destruction, but always saying we will go on, and we hope that all members out in the world will continue to stand by us faithfully in this sense. The Goetheanum must, of course, be raised up again. And she, Ita Wegman, committed herself with all her strength to this reconstruction of the Goetheanum. I mean, she was the leading doctor of her clinic in Alesheim and really very busy at this time. It was also a new hospital founded, opened in 21, so not 2 years old. But now she brought half of her force to the Goetheanum, and she encouraged the Swiss members, which are not so poor as in other countries, to give individually 1,000 francs each member for the reconstruction. So at this time, the Swiss Society had 700 members, and she said if all of them would contribute 1,000 francs, and if there is somebody who has no money, maybe another one will give the double price, we would have almost the first million. And she really went to people and asked people, especially those who had money, and she became very active. But it was not only a Swiss initiative, and we had some lectures about this topic at the first part of the year, how Ita Wegman and others collected the money in Switzerland and encouraged the members worldwide to overtake responsibility for the second building. For Ita Wegman, it was clear, first of all, the Swiss people, because they are hosting the Goetheanum. And she said Dr. Steiner is waiting for initiative from the Switzerland especially. We are here, she's saying in one letter, and we have been given the Goetheanum. And in a way, she said, our own connection to the Goetheanum was not strong enough, but now we will make it better. So first of all, not on the priority list, but in the list of responsibility, Switzerland. But then Ita Wegman was part of a group inviting all other countries where national societies for anthroposophy existed, or at least anthroposophists. And they invited for an international meeting here in July, 100 years ago, a little bit more now, where all these countries sent their delegates. So all these groups or national societies elected a delegate representing the country, and then they came all together to discuss the possibilities for a second building, also economically. And Ita Wegman was very active in this process, also bringing the delegates to the Goetheanum, because she realized from the beginning of the year, January, February, that Dr. Steiner wanted to have a radical change in the society. Until then, until the destruction of the first building, it was more or less a building project performed by the German Anthroposophical Society, which was the leading society, which was the executive council of the whole Anthroposophical Society. It was a German society with some international members. And it was in a way clear that the building should have been in a German big city. So most of you will know Munich was the place. But the local authority didn't allow a building in Munich, an anthroposophical style. So at the end, it came over the border to this neutral Swiss country where there was a positive response, but it was still more or less a German project. Many co-workers came to Switzerland, more than 400 young people, anthroposophists, and you know the stories. They came from Russian, Margarita Voloshina, Max Voloshin, Asya Turgeneva, Andrei Bialy, and a lot of other painters, artists, co-workers. They came from all countries, but still it was so the leading persons in the building as association of the first Goetheanum were the Germans, and the German society was the head of the Anthroposophical Society. But after the destruction of the building and knowing about the political situation in Germany, 4 years after the ending of the First World War, Steiner said to Ita Wegman in a personal conversation, there must be a transformation. The second building must come out of the world, not from Germany. Also the money. Germany couldn't pay any more. It was a destroyed country economically after the war, lost the war, but also after the Treaty of Versailles with all these paragraphs. So the Germans couldn't, and they were not allowed even to give money over the border because the country was so poor. And there was a law that you couldn't give your German money to a Swiss project. But also spiritually. The second building, if there is one, must be part of the world. This seems to be very wonderful, and we all like this notion to be part of the world, but it has to do with mutuality. So the building could only start if the world is saying yes and also giving the opportunity, in this case also the money. So Ita Wegman and others were collecting the delegates from all those countries where anthroposophists lived and asked, would you please contribute to a second building? How much is possible in your country to give? And this was quite a dramatic meeting in July 1923. At the end, they came to a certain sum, almost 1 million of francs. For many countries, it was a lot of money. But Steiner said we have two challenges. The one is the economic fund, and the second is the moral fund. And at the end of this conference of the delegates, he said, unfortunately, the conversations did not come to a moral fund, only to an economic fund, which was good, but something was missing. And Ita Wegman was very busy also with the missing link, with this moral fund. What does it mean? We don't know actually, and I can't be the interpreter of it. But there is, let's say, one letter, end of May, Ita Wegman is describing to a member living far from here, Dr. Steiner now gives an incredible amount of esoteric in his lectures, because he finds that people need that now, and has completely freed himself from the economic, like the coming day, in order to devote himself now in the spiritual. We are heading towards a very beautiful spiritual era. So Steiner was in the chairmanship of this board of the so-called coming day, this kind of joint enterprises in Stuttgart mainly, and they tried to have these associations of factories, and they called themselves the coming day. And out of this agglomeration, association of enterprises, there was the idea that at the end there will be benefit in working together, and the benefit should be for spiritual initiatives, as the Waldorf School, as a school for spiritual science. They all need money still today. Where is the money coming from? From economy, Steiner said. So spiritual life never can raise its own money. But so it is a duty of the economic life to foster the spiritual life, or let's say the institutions who are creating the spirit or receiving the spirit. And Steiner was one of those who took responsibility for these associations of enterprises and factories, and it took a lot of time from him. And now he stopped this activity, even if this association was still very important. But he realized, obviously, he needs his whole force for this second building endeavor or initiative. Not only in building, because the building process physically was the last one. The main theme in 1923 was building a society which is good enough or which is appropriate to have a second building and a school for spiritual science. So this is a building process, not of a physical building, but a social building, and the culmination is the so-called Christmas conference. It is a kind of a conference for a consecration of a society. It is really the foundation stone was to consecrate not the hill, but the society. The society and its heart, which is the School for Spiritual Science. So Ita Wegman realizes Steiner is going a very spiritual path. We followed this path in the first part of the year with lectures and seminars here from the section. Just to mention one element, I think most of you will know, but some of us forget the dates, doesn't matter. I think most of you know the Steiner's imaginations about the cycle of the year. So the Easter imagination, or the Christmas imagination, or St. John, the Michaelic one. But these types of lecture linked to the theme of the breathing of the earth. It started in Easter 23. Never before Steiner spoke in that way about the cycle of the year and the breathing rhythm of the earth as an organism, as a spiritual, physical entity. It started here on Easter time. And I could mention many other lectures and lecture circle where you can see it's an enormous path towards a Christmas conference, but this was unclear. But Ita Wegman realized he's going, preparing, she said, preparing a very beautiful spiritual era. But really in the midst of a half-destroyed Europe. So if we hear a spiritual era, some of us think in meditation retreats and so on. But in fact, Steiner wanted to have a school for spiritual science in saving the earth. That means human civilization. That means agriculture and climate and so on. So a spiritual era, but as a precondition to transform the public situation on earth. And how it will go, they all did not know. Now we know in retrospective a little bit more about history and about history of the society and the movement. But they waited from day to day. Ita Wegman was always very awakened. And what is he doing now, Dr. Steiner? There came a man to Dr. Steiner, one of the co-workers. His name was Wolfgang Wachsmuth, so the brother of Günther Wachsmuth, who became prominent later here on the hill, the treasurer and Günther. But Wolfgang, his brother, he was an editor. And he once brought the question to Steiner. He brought new books and newspapers, all negative about anthroposophy. Also after the burning. I mean, now they could be silent because it's all destroyed. No, they went on. Because Steiner said he will go on. So still it was the same thing in the newspaper and in some little books. Horrible things about anthroposophy. And this man brought this this stuff to Steiner and said, and this was maybe the first man who asked in this way, what can we do to protect you against this? Is it possible? And Steiner said, if you find some people forming a little group, I will invite you and I will tell you. So at the end, maybe 15 people come together, and one was Ita Wegman, also Mary Steiner. And they were invited one evening. It was in Villa Hansi where Steiner lived. And they awaited a kind of, I think, instruction of, yes, how to defend anthroposophy and Steiner in the public and so on. And the astonishing thing was, I mean, I wasn't part of the group, so I just from the memories. But from the memories, the astonishing thing was, Steiner gave an esoteric lesson, an esoteric hour. So completely out of mantras, of meditation. And in fact, it was a kind of a beginning of a mystery class. We know it now from the, there are no writings by them because they were just sitting there. And it was forbidden to write in an esoteric lesson. They were just listening. But some of them had brilliance, memory, Maria Röschel especially. And she, coming home all the night, she, as people did in the past, memorized. And now we have her published memories and also Steiner's notebook entries. And there we can say it is an introduction to a kind of mystery, renewal. And with cults and texts from Old India, from Hebrew, from Greek, from old alchemy, from the Rosicrucians, from Freemasonry. But we don't know if Steiner, what he did, if he performed something as a cultist or just speaking the mantras. They were really astonished. Steiner as a teacher of the mysteries. I mean, they met him quite often as a teacher, and it was not the first time that Steiner taught about mysteries. But it was a new way. It was a kind of, the mysteries were there. It was a kind of presence of these old mysteries, but in a new way. And if you look to the collected works, number 265, there you can find these memories of Röschel and Steiner's notebook entries. And I think some of you will know some of the meditations or the mantras he spoke. Pilgrimage to the ego or Catch the Butterfly became very famous later, or Awakening in Thinking. Maybe Awakening in Thinking is one we could integrate here in my own presentation in the English translation. And I will end the lecture then with English and German, so you hear it 2 times in English and 1 time in German. And I mean, this is not now the solution and the answer what Steiner did this evening, but it maybe gives us a certain impression. And it's a question of awakening. It is also kind of an answer. How could Steiner be protected? How anthroposophy can be protected? How the hill, how the building, how the high school, the preconditioning is awakening. It is not the precondition, it's not a next article in the newspaper or a better book or guns and armies, but awakening. Awakening in thinking, awakening in feeling, awakening in willing, awakening in the I. So an awakening of all soul forces and culminating in the human ego, in the I. I mean, you know, the foundation stone meditation is a process of awakening, but from the will to the feeling capacity to the I. And then in the 4th passage, then it's going back to the turning point of time where the I, the human I, incarnated first time in the Christ being. So in a way, this simple meditation, which is not so simple, I will read it now, is also a kind of preparing something to come. This is not a foundation stone. It is not a foundation stone meditation, but there are relationships. So I will read it first in English and later on then in German, but at the end of the lecture. Awakening thinking, you are in the spirit light of the world. Experience yourself seeking and sensing the luminosity. Awakening feeling, you are in the spirit deeds of the world. Experience yourself feeling the spirit deeds. Awakening will, you are in the spirit beings of the world. Experience yourself thinking the spirit beings. Awaken in the eye, you are in your own spirit being. Experience yourself receiving being from the gods and giving it to yourself. We don't know what happened in this lesson, how they went home afterwards, if they talked to each other, what they heard and what does it mean. We only know a little remark which is important for our theme tonight from one of the meetings of the group, of this little group, but not in the midst of an esoteric lesson, just preparing one of these meetings. They met 3 times with Dr. Steiner. And in one of these meetings, Günther Wachsmuth, so the one who later became the treasurer, said, the only thing we can do at the moment is to close ourselves firmly to Dr. Wegman, because at the moment she is the only channel to Dr. Steiner for us. This is a remarkable sentence, and in fact we don't know the background. That this must have been in May 23, or the second lesson was in October. Could also be in autumn, that Wachsmuth has the feeling the channel, the bridge to Dr. Steiner is Ita Wegman. And this was a complete new position of Ita Wegman. In a way, they all knew her since some years because she was leading the first anthroposophical clinic in Arlesheim. She was not a prominent anthroposophist in terms of giving lectures, seminars, being on the stage. She never liked to be on the stage. But she was the doctor. And this was, of course, a famous position because she was the first female doctor running the first anthroposophical clinic. So, and coming from Indonesia, Java, from the Netherlands. She was somebody, but never the bridge to Steiner. I mean, before they would have said Mary Steiner is also, because we are in her space, Edith Marian, which became closer and closer to Steiner since the end of the First World War. And they were co-working together on the statue. And they were erecting this house. I mean, this house was built, just to mention it a little bit as a breathing aspect, this house was built because Edith Marian once said to Dr. Steiner, we need space to live for the co-workers, but they can't afford Swiss apartments. So what we need is cheap space. And couldn't we erect simple houses on the hill for the co-workers? And so they together designed with an architect. It was Paul Bay, the father of Taco Bay. Some of you will remember Taco Bay as leading the Christian community. Father was an architect, Beatenberg originally, and he created together with Steiner and Marian the houses. So they were also close working together. But now the feeling of Wachsmuth. Ita Wegman is the bridge, the channel, the open window to Steiner. And this is a development we started probably in the night of the fire. In that night of the fire, there was a certain moment in the early morning hours, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, when Ita Wegman decided to go home and to have a look to the patients, because they couldn't sleep that night in Arlesheim. And of course, a lot of those patients in those years were also connected to the building. And the building and the fire was, it was not just on the hill. You could see it on the central place in Basel, in the cathedral. This is what the newspaper report said some days later, that a lot of people were at midnight collected there as every New Year's Eve. And they wanted to sing and to be together. And suddenly the sky was reddish, red, fire of red sky. And they did not know in Basel where it is from, what happens. And they don't see any fire. But then suddenly somebody said, Dornach is burning. So just to mention, it was not only here on the hill, it was whew. And so in Arlesheim you could easily, and of course there were telephone rings and the fire department from Arlesheim, from Dornach. So I would say the patients knew about it. And Ita Wegman decided to go home, wanted to go home 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But in fact, when she wanted to turn right to go down the hill, you know, the little Fink house, and so, but then she saw on the left Steiner standing close to the fire, near to the fire, very alone, just a man standing there in front of the fire. It was not that fire anymore, but it was still going on. And they were the last columns standing there, and this little man. And there Ita Wegman decided, stop, go to him. And in fact, she developed the courage to go to him and stood by his side. Just standing there. Then 2 people were standing there. And in a way, for my inner image, this was her position till he died. Because in a way, this destruction, this enormous center of destruction, he had to confront. But he needs support. And in a way, it was also a destiny situation. This was the time of the healer. The doctors, they can't withdraw from the destroyed situation. Some of these illnesses in medicine, they are quite ugly from the outer appearance. So with a sense of beauty, you can be shocked sometimes about the deformation of a human being by a heavy traffic accident or other things. But the doctor's attitude is to go there instead of to preserve yourself. And you have to stand there and to be present and active. So, but I'm a little bit talking in symbols, but I think it's a true image, her position in that night, and this is documented by history, and the situation after that night. So Wachsmuth had the idea we need her as a channel to Steiner. I think it was in October, preparing the second lesson. Maybe you will understand in 10, 15, 20 minutes why I think it was in October and not in the May lesson. So an enormous impulse of deepening anthroposophy, and in some of the lectures Steiner really said, for the first time after 21 years or 22 years of anthroposophical lessons, lectures, in some of these lectures in 23 he said, you know, anthroposophy is a spiritual being. It is as a human being. It is invisible in between all of you. And you should try to meet anthroposophy, not only ideas, concepts, books. No, the true, real spiritual essence. This is a reality, living in between human beings. And what we now need is a new relationship to this spiritual being. And this relationship can only be built with your own innermost being. And in some of these lectures, when Steiner brought this motif, there are very wonderful formulations. Once he said, experiencing this anthroposophy in the heart, in your own heart, is something as somebody knocks at the gate of your heart, knocks at the gate of your heart with anthroposophy and says, let me in, for I am yourself. I am your true human being. Anthroposophy knocks at the heart, asks, let me in. Who are you? I'm your true human being. It's an interesting description, isn't it? And also this soul of man. I mean, it's all preparing a little bit a tremendous transformation of the society and the high school in the Christmas time, with this reinforcement brought by the foundation stone and its meditation. Let me in, for I am you yourself. I am your true human being. And I think, even if it sounds very challenging, I think we all know this experience to a certain extent. To a certain point at a certain point in our biographies, we not only met ideas of some of lectures of books of Steiner and the co-workers, but more. But we couldn't describe it. And we would never say maybe there's a spiritual being knocking at my heart. But it was more than a good new idea, something which has an element of an essence. It's very hard to say what attracts us sometimes in anthroposophy, because the society is sometimes not so attractive. Or the building is also sometimes not so attractive. Or our institutions are sometimes also not so attractive. And our so-called co-anthroposophists, so our dear brothers and sisters, sometimes not so attractive. So sometimes we are meeting as, even if the attractivity is not so strong. So what keeps us together? What is, in fact, in the center of the society, the hidden center? I think it has to do with such a spiritual experience, even if it's not all the time as clear. So, and then the year went on. Of course, Ita Wegman was in the clinic, and a lot of patients and a lot of challenges and many other things happened. I only select some little mark stones. And the one enormous mark stone happened in Wales. I mean, this was the longest journey of Steiner in 23. In between the destruction and the Christmas conference was an invitation, came from an Englishman, that Steiner takes part in a summer conference on a little place called Penman, hard to spell for Germans, also for some English people, in Wales. And he wanted to host a conference there. This Mr. Dunlop, he was his name, a wise man. He was a brilliant anthroposophist, totally linked to the world and its development. He wanted to have true anthroposophy and invited Steiner to come. And by Dunlop is also the title of Steiner's lecture circle, as far as I remember from Dunlop himself, Spiritual and Physical Evolution of the World and Humanity, Past, Present and Future from the Viewpoint of Anthroposophy. Going to the center of what anthroposophy has to bring. And Steiner went to this place, and he realized by the landscape, by the atmosphere, by all things which happened there, that he could speak truly, purely anthroposophically. Maybe we will say he did it his whole life, to speak purely anthroposophically. But he would not mention this if this wouldn't be an exception. So we have to study again all these lectures and to see what is purely anthroposophically. But in fact, Steiner had a feeling the spirit here, on this place, in this landscape, together with these people, in August 1923, created an entirely esoteric atmosphere. And he later on in his review said this conference was one of the landmarks of the evolution of the anthroposophical movement. What is the anthroposophical movement? It's not so easy to say. I mean, if we say these are all the initiatives, I mean, only some people were in Penman Mauer. It's this odd name that Ita Wegman said. So the movement is something different from the sum of all initiatives, all Waldorf schools and all clinics and all doctors. The movement, the spiritual movement, seems to be more on the spiritual plane. It is more maybe the responsible stream behind, or are these the spirits, the good spirits of anthroposophy, the leading spirits? I don't know, but he said a markstone in the development of the movement. So Ita Wegman came also. Late she got an invitation. She heard by him that he will give some medical lectures as well on the way back from Penman Mauer to London. And he would love that she would be present. So, and Ita Wegman always was a traveler, and she liked to travel. If she had a possibility, that means she needed responsible doctors for the clinic, and then she liked to travel. And she was living in this wooden house, which was not erected at this time. At this time, Ita Wegman was living in her office of the clinic. This was all she had, and luggage, and so she could easily go because she had nothing to leave behind. But the patients, yes, okay. So the patients had to be responsible in the responsible care. But so she liked, and she went also to Penman Mauer, and it became an enormous experience there. I mean, also the medical lecture he gave there, not for the doctors, for everybody. This was maybe the first of a serial of lectures Steiner gave for everybody, for interested human beings about anthroposophical medicine. And she heard him saying, and I think maybe a little bit getting pale, particularly reference should be made here, if we talk about anthroposophical medicine, to the Clinical Therapeutic Institute in Arlesheim, which is under the excellent direction of Dr. Wegman, who has a particularly beneficial effect on this institute in that she has what I would like to call the courage to heal. And then he's explaining. Pole position. And it's interesting, after that lecture, there are many other public lectures I mentioned in London, in Vienna, in Arnhem. It is always Ita Wegman. There was this other clinic in Stuttgart, never meant by Steiner. Ita Wegman was brought. This is the model. This is how it should be done. Her institute in Arlesheim and her person. I mean, it existed since 2 years. But Steiner had come to a decision with whom to go on. Courage to heal. Also in the night of the fire. So I think she was pleased, but also a little bit maybe astonished by this estimation. And obviously they had many conversations, or some conversations, in these days of Penman Mauer. Ita Wegman in her memories indirectly says it, saying that there was this special atmosphere, and then if anyone who has had a good fortune to have one or more conversations with Dr. Steiner there in Penman Mauer during this time will know how something special still resonated there, something that was in the atmosphere and gave the conversation a special note. Ancient wisdom, ancient tradition. I mean, there was a stone circle on the heights, but it was also the whole landscape, all Druid place, a link to the Hibernian mysteries. But I don't know if Ita Wegman had these notions, ancient wisdom around the area, and it was as if from a deep sleep, and many friends who were there could sympathize with this. From a deep sleep, this ancient wisdom was awakened by Rudolf Steiner, spoken words. The anthroposophical took on an even deeper radiance than it already had. The life and weaving of the spiritual within the physical, of which anthroposophy teaches, was felt more intimately. Very interesting experience of a doctor. I mean that the spirit or the spiritual, even within the physical, the incarnation of the spirit and the incarnation of the spirit in between human beings. Anthroposophy as a living entity in between I and you. And it was unexpected. I mean, it was just, they went there to this interesting little odd place of this conference. There was an old hotel and they could live there and a lecture room, but then the atmosphere around. And then they climbed to the mountains and then the stone circles and all this. What is this? Was ist dies? Is named in one of the poems of Hölderlin. Was ist dies? And so they did not know. Now we know that Penman Mauer is a landmark of the evolution of, but they were just there, surprised. And in the conversation Ita Wegman had, we don't know exactly about the conversations, but we know some elements that she asked him there or in London, because then they went to London, about the future of medicine and about her inner longing that a new medicine shall arise and also a new teaching attitude of medicine. In a London lecture, later on, she reminded this question she brought to Steiner. She said it was all a mystery of asking. You must have the right question to Steiner. And I once posed him the question, and this was in Penman Mauer or on the way back to London. Medicine is the one I am looking for, mystery medicine. Can this kind of doctors within the society get this? Can we get mystery medicine? And then she's saying he answered he gave an affirmation, and that was the beginning of my medical work with Rudolf Steiner. The first suggestion for the founding of the medical section. This is a remarkable sentence because since 2 years, she was working together with Steiner. He came regular to visit the patients, and they invented many new drugs together, pharmaceutical drugs, and saw many patients, but now it was a next level. And it started with a question, mystery medicine is the one I am looking for. Or in a notebook, some years later, she tried to remind herself the exact question. And there she wrote about her question that it has been, why is the mysterious in medicine not more broad and cast into the other thing? Why must the medical courses be given so intellectually? And it had to be go in this way, Dr. Steiner answered, because the conditions for the other were not there, but that you ask these questions is essential. So a subtle criticism in her, because she heard many medical lectures of Steiner, and now she asked, why so intellectual? And why not more the mystery aspect? I mean, what is mystery? This is a deep theme, but maybe we let it here now in an atmosphere. Why not more about the mystery of what is a human being? What is a disease? What is therapy? What are healing forces? These are deep questions on an existential level. And in his lecture courses, Steiner gave a lot of perspectives, how to make better drugs, how to have other understanding of the heart organ, but it was never the atmosphere of mysteries in the medical courses until then. And she brought the question in the Penman Maurer, and he said, it's important as you asked. But obviously, in the same or another conversation, she not only was fixed on medicine, she asked about teaching in general on the Hill. Why can't we have a mystery school here? I mean, she heard him in this esoteric lesson in May, talking out of mantras from India, I said Hebrew. And why can't we have an esoteric school here on the Hill? This was also a question of Ita Wegman. Later on, Steiner said to another anthroposophist, she brought the question. This was the Parzival question. And I could start with the help of Michael to come to an answer. It was so important that the human being brought the question. Then Steiner could ask. He said, ask the leading spirit of our time if the time is ripe for a Michael esoteric school, which became the first class, or a school with a first class. But first of all, a human being had to ask. 20 years before, Murray Steiner asked, couldn't there be an anthroposophical society in Middle Europe? Not only a theosophical one. And Steiner said, good that you asked. And then he also, and here a second question, so it was also part. And then from other memories, we know that they have conversations about the future of the society, the anthroposophical one. Steiner was still very sad feeling, because in a way he gave so many hints to the members to awaken and the society to awaken, how to build an effective anthroposophical society. Not only a family, not only a study club, but an effective society in the world, protecting the Goethe Anum, hosting a school for spiritual science. So a society where the members can be proud of being part of it. Internationally, Steiner gave many hints, especially after the destruction of the Goethe Anum, but not a lot happened. And then Ita Wegman said he was deeply saddened about this. And then the courses in Penman Maurer and Ilkley nearby happened. And it seemed to me that from that moment on, Rudolf Steiner had a solution in mind for the society. He spoke of how the fire that destroyed the Goethe Anum had revealed him tremendous secrets that there were now only gradually becoming clear to him in the great context. Mystery knowledge has now become free, and this mystery knowledge which has been guarded in the earlier old mysteries was now to become the teaching material of anthroposophy. This is a little bit a strange memory, because she started with a society question and then with a kind of conversation when Steiner told her about what he's now understanding more and more about the fire, what was in the fire, that the old hidden mystery content became free and now should come again as the teaching center of anthroposophy. But why is this the solution for the society? Probably we don't know at this point. I will come back to it in 5 minutes, and then it's becoming clearer. But just to say, they had conversation about medicine, about an esoteric schooling path, not only for the doctors and therapists, for all of us, about the future of the society and the questioning of mystery. And they had conversation about it in between I and you. Something happened in between Steiner and Wegman. In a notebook, she fixed the sentence, Penman Maurer, karma fully revealed, soul element, understanding my side, jubilated the spiritual world, he said. It is very apocryph, we would say. It is fragments. Karma fully revealed, destiny fully revealed. I would say revealed by him. Margarete Bockholt, close colleague of Ita Wegman, later told that Wegman told her that Steiner talked to Ita Wegman about her past and the space in between. So history, destiny, revealed, but not by her own cognition, but told by him in a way. He has told her, maybe she asked, we don't know. Something in between, both of them, collaboration, but not starting anew, or starting anew, but having a background. Karma fully revealed. And then soul element, human soul. But what does it mean here? Maybe the next sentence giving the answer, understanding from my side. Maybe an understanding not spiritually, but saying yes. It is quite often difficult to say yes to history, even to rich history, to accept or to let it in, knocking on your heart, saying, I am you. Maybe our own history is saying, I'm you. What is the destiny? This is ourself, partly. I don't know. But here, understanding from my side. And maybe because of this understanding, a kind of jubilated the spiritual world, he said. Because maybe there was a soul understanding of very deep content. I am a little bit, I think we don't know. I mean, there is a sentence in a notebook, and there are big books about this sentence. But in fact, there is a mystery of a human being or another human being. And we know, we call her Ita Wegman, we call him Steiner, and sometimes we think we know about history. But as deeper as we go in our studies, we come to the point that we don't know much. We are just a little bit, a certain approach, not more. But something happened in between, I and you. I mean, Martin Buber brought the book, I and Thou, I and You. It was in 1923, one of the most famous books of the 20th century, the same year, that the mystery is the in-between sphere. And this is real, not only that I have my ideas, who is the other one, my own brain images. No, there's a reality in between us. and a book about a philosophical book about the space in between. They went back to London, and in London, doctors were waiting in the famous Harley Street, which was the doctor street in London. I mean, they were not all in this street. Would be horrible. A street full of doctors. I mean, even dangerous, probably. Too many. I mean, sometimes an overestimation of medicine is creating medical problems. But at least there were famous doctors in Harley Street. And one of them, Dr. Larkins, was interested in anthroposophy, in anthroposophical medicine, and since years in contact with Ita Wegman. And now he had the splendid idea to invite the colleagues and getting Steiner for a lecture. So this was the first lecture Steiner gave in a medical office, big enough for 40 doctors, so bigger than Edith Marian's space here. And you know, English doctors, maybe they were all well-dressed and sitting there brilliantly. And Steiner was talking about cancer, mistletoe, the machine, the famous machine to create out of viscum an effective drug. He never talked about it in a lecture, not even in a medical course lecture here at the Goethe. Totally open, directly from the center to the professionals. And this is very interesting, enormously courageous. And they were very, very touched. Long conversation afterwards. A lot of them wanted that he sees their patients. And together with Ita Wegman, he made these consultations. The seed of the medical section was laid in London, she said. Interesting, not in Penman Maurer. This was a little bit as the background. In Steiner's biography, he has the same a little bit with Vienna and the background of Vienna. If you remind those who know Steiner's biography, Potschach, Neudorfel, this is the spiritual background. And then he's going to university, but it's always the background. And here is also Penman Maurer, which is western from London as far as I know, but now in the capital, now in this capital of natural science, modern medicine, modern science. And there he brought the impulse. And the seed of the medical section, it's good to study these lectures he gave to the doctors. It's in number 319. And then after returning home, we see in the notebook of Ita Wegman from week to week another meditation. I mean, they started a personal schooling path. She became the scholar of Dr. Steiner. I mean, she was it since more than 20 years. She was part of an esoteric school opened in 1994. But now there is a new mystery schooling between I and you, which is not a love story. This has to do with spiritual development, but in a sphere of friendship and belonging together. Belonging together for a task in civilization, belonging together in front of the abyss, belonging together in saving anthroposophy. Without Ita Wegman, I don't think there would have been a Christmas conference, a renewal of the Anthroposophical Society, a renewal of the School of Spiritual Science, an opening of the first class, and many of the courses in 24. Without the doctor, without the assistant, without the old friend. I mean, Mary Steiner was also very, very important for Steiner. But Mary Steiner, I would say, was not a person for the time of destruction. I mean, she was an artist. I mean, arts and destruction, okay, but there was healing needed. Steiner needed a kind of a destiny force. Mary Steiner spent the night at home of the fire. And she said, I couldn't bear to see the destruction of the cupolas. I would have not survived it. And maybe she was right. In a way, she was extremely sensitive. And we know that Edith Marian died. Hermann Linde died. Artists, I would never say that the diseases were caused by the fire, but they were in a close, timely connection. And sometimes we know from medicine there are connections in time, but not all the time. And it's not a simple relationship. But Mary Steiner decided not to come to the hill in the night of the fire and not to see it. She heard it. And Steiner went home and told her, but she stayed at home. And I think it was right what she did. It is not at all, she was also courageous, but other. But Ita Wegman's time was to go to the fire. And in a way, this enormous will to heal. And this is not only a psychological element, this was a destiny force. And so when Steiner revealed her past, partly it's a revelation of the transformation of will qualities, because she was not always a healer. And in a way, it's very interesting, the evolution of the will capacity and the will to heal capacity. So from September, October, we see in the notebooks, in the archive, new meditations. And now they are all published by Emanuel Zeilmans in the 4th volume of his collection. And we can see it's an intensive working together. I come now to the end. And this is a little bit astonishing because in a way, Ita Wegman said in Penman Maurer, he saw a solution for the society. Then he talked about the mysteries. But then we see what Steiner did. He went to Vienna, he went to the Netherlands to society meetings for building national societies, that they can form an international general anthroposophical society at the end of the year in this Christmas conference. But first of all, they needed national societies. So he accompanied the Austrians, he accompanied the English people in London, he accompanied the Netherlands, the Dutch people, but it were horrible gatherings. He was so depressed because they did not see the need of the time. I mean, they were fighting against each other. They had a lot of individual votes. This one wanted to have this one, the other one, this one. But they never had the consciousness to build an effective society. In this year, politically dramatic, Hitler was near the gate. I mean, Hitler tried to get the power in Germany in November 23. His political party was collecting a lot of votes. And in Italian, we had Mussolini. In Russia, there was Stalin there. Primo de Rivera was in Spain, and later on Franco. So we see that those dark forces, and the center will be the Hitler one. I mean, he was the major one. And he prepared in 23 to get the power. But the Anthroposophical Society had different opinions about paragraph 1 or 3 or so. And Steiner was incredibly depressed in a way. And in November 17 in The Hague, he said in one of those evenings of this national, he said, maybe I should separate from the society completely and to collect some people and will form an order. I can't work with those people. And then a memory of Daniel van Bemmelen, who was standing there. It was in the hotel in the night. Steiner full of frustration. And there were some anthroposophists around him, Bemmelen, Zeilmans, Wegman. And Bemmelen said, Ita Wegman stood and went to Steiner and said, Doctor, you can't abandon the Anthroposophical Society. You told me this summer how you intend to build up the new society under your leadership. Dr. Steiner stood up. Obviously, he was sitting there, walked towards her, took her hands, so both hands, which he did sometimes, and said warmly and with fire, yes, Frau Doctor, if you help me, then I will do this. It's very interesting. So in a way, obviously, he had said to her in Penman Maurer that maybe he should take it in his hands and re-establish the society and the high school. But maybe this was, he said it, but then he went home and to the next conference. Now she reminded him to the statement. So they not only talked about mysteries, but also the mysteries of the center of a new society. And she reminded him, I mean, he had not forgotten, but maybe another step was needed. That somebody's coming and saying, listen, you can't do that. You can't abandon the society. And again, she has to say it. This was a step. So again, a mystery between I and you. So last of September, Steiner took the decision. In the Christmas conference, he said that he did this overflowing after a long inner struggle, the decision to take the chair. Because all the time he was waiting that the society people will rebuild their society. He always said, I don't need a society. It is not my society. You wanted to have the society to bring anthroposophy here in the public sphere to life. I bring anthroposophy, but the society is not for me. He was a long time not even a member, Steiner. He was a teacher. But now an important decision to overtake the destiny, it's also the destiny, still today I think, of the society, but only because she said, as Marie Steiner said in Berlin, because in Berlin, when she asked for founding a society, he said the precondition will be that you help me, Marie Steiner. And now the renewal of the society, again, there was somebody needed. But it's not a priority. It is other times and other persons, sometimes hard. For Marie Steiner in this case, it was not easy to understand, but lives go on, and sometimes destiny is bringing the next step. The first society was still very important. Marie Steiner had her importance, but there was the healing impulse needed, also a deep, deep destiny. Elisabeth Frede said he prepared the Christmas conference only with Ita Wegman. I can't judge, she said it. But in fact, the whole December is preparing then the conference. And it started with lecture on the 2nd of December about Ephesus. Very interesting, the mysteries were the theme. So in the forthcoming lectures of the General Anthroposophical Society, the section, we will bring also back to our memory these next steps. But today we wanted to focus on Ita Wegman. And of course then she was part of the council and she became the medical section, of course, but also was part of the council. And it was an enormous... So we can ask how it was for his health. Psychologically, it was not a sufficient lecture. We don't know about the inner life of Ita Wegman in 23, but I am not the person to know about her own soul life. She was very astonished. She was also overwhelmed. In Penman Maurer, it was as a new life. And then from Penman Maurer on, they went on to Vienna together. They went to The Hague. And they saw more patients. And she was near. And spiritually, they had a time of meditation together, 11 o'clock, before midnight. We also know the meditation he gave to her. About light, by the way. But it's not my theme today. But just even if they were distant by space, they were together. One time, Ita Wegman said she was disturbed. There was an emergency situation in the clinic. 10 to 11, and she had to run to the patient. And next morning, Steiner said to her, "Where have you been?" So she realized he's totally aware. They met each other quite often now for the patients. Steiner intensified his visits in the clinic, and they started to work on the first medical textbook. Every evening at 6 o'clock in his studio, his atelier, she had to come, and she liked to come, to him. And then at 6 o'clock in the evening, they started to talk about the patients they've seen in the morning and this concept of the book. And it's well known, or it was well known in Dornach, that they started at 6 and you could hear it from outside the building, because Steiner started with praying the Lord's Prayer with quite a strong voice, and you could hear. So it was in his studio where this textbook, because medicine, healing was partly in the center of the future. I wouldn't say the medicalization of the society and the Harley Street, no, but a healing impulse. We need it in education, we need it in agriculture, we need it in economy, especially in economy. So healing impulse is but the archetype for the medical section. And maybe you remember the last sentence of Steiner at the Christmas conference saying, "And now farewell, go home to your heilkräftiges Wirken in der Welt, to your activities full of healing forces in the world." But he said it to everyone. So to the artists, to the normal members, not to the doctors. But how it was for Ita Wegman, I don't know. There is one description of Willem Seilmans von Emmichhoven that during the evening lectures of the Christmas conference, where Steiner was teaching about destiny, about the evolution of human soul, about the evolution of memory, and memorizing the past and talking about memory and about the evolution of human soul and coming back to Ephesus, Seilman, sitting beside Ita Wegman, said, overflowing of tears. She was crying. This very strong woman. So it was such a touching development, but also not an easy development. I mean, who I am or who she was. And what a year. Now, the end should be, again, the verse. Maybe I start with the German version, because that's how Steiner brought it. And we will end this English. It is not on the level it should be, but it is a kind of English. We will end this English evening with a translation, which is quite good, I think. So, and then take it home and, yeah, I don't know. I think she is one of these stars. Tonight, maybe the sky is again wonderful, full of stars, and maybe we need this kind of support, as I said, but support, I mean, from the heights, but also from the limbs. In a way, sometimes we have to learn to stand and have courage to be upright, but we need also this orientation. And then we can really, in our feeling capacity, embrace the world. And I think Ita Wegman is a good support. So I start again with the awakening meditation. So keep your consciousness, and then the night will come. And I start with the German version, and we end together with the English one. Im Denken erwache. Du bist im Geisteslicht der Welt. Erlebe dich, das Leuchtende, tastend. Im Fühlen erwache. Du bist in den Geistestaten der Welt. Erlebe dich, die Geisteswesen denkend, im Wollen erwache. Du bist in den Geisteswesen der Welt. Erlebe dich, die Geisteswesen denkend, im Ich erwache. Du bist in deinem eigenen Geisteswesen. Erlebe dich, Sein von Göttern empfangend und dir selbst gebend. Awaken in thinking. You are in the spirit light of the world. Experience yourself seeking and sensing the luminosity. Awaken in feeling. You are in the spirit deeds of the world. Experience yourself feeling the spirit deeds. Awaken in will. You are in the spirit beings of the world. Experience yourself thinking the spirit beings. Awaken in the I. You are in your own spirit being. Experience yourself receiving being from the gods and giving it to yourself. So thank you all for being together tonight, and it's maybe also interesting that the English version was correct and not the German by my thought, but maybe you got it, the English one. And I think it is in the sense of Ita Wegman that we shared this English world language tonight on the level as I am able, but she was a person really open to the cosmopolitan situation. And so I thank you for, in the name of the section, for coming to Edith Marian's little house here, little apartment, and forming a space here, because this kind of, even if we have it here also for the international, the Zoom event, it is so necessary that an organ of reception is here in the room, a little spiritual community, and this can grasp then or form the surrounding of something happening, but this should be brought to the world. So in a way, this is the mystery of the Goetheanum, that it's very small, even if the Goetheanum building is in a way bigger than here, but all the time it is a first envelope to enable a kind of activity and then had to go out. So Steiner said to the young doctors, form a kind of a circle around Ita Wegman and the research, and then bring it out to the world. Then it can work. So only by a kind of a little spiritual community, the seed which is in the center can be brought to the world. So in a way, thank you very much for those who had a chance to come tonight here in Edith Marian's room, and then hopefully it is well received also from the other ones who are far, far away from this physical place. So thank you and have a good night.